So this talk will be a bit more technical, and it's about JavaScript and React. Not sure how many of you are interested in that. Hopefully, at least a few. So I'll start with like a super brief history of JS. It will be like really short. So it was created in Netscape. I'm not really sure how many of you actually remember this company, like Netscape Navigator or stuff like that. Yeah, cool. Yeah, maybe. It was created by a guy called Brendan Eich. It's not that important to remember that. It will become important like in a second. And it was created in 1995. Any ideas like what other languages were released that year?
Java.
No. Yes. And another that we are using?
What was the other?
Java. And another one?
Python?
Ruby. Yay, as well. As well as PHP. So it's like pretty cool year, I guess. Maybe not for PHP, but like other stuff. And the really interesting fact is that actually the language was created in 10 days. Yeah, exactly. That's why I mentioned that. That's like the first argument why it's so awesome. To be fair, the prototype was created in 10 days, but actually it hasn't changed that much. It was called Mocha at first, then it was renamed to LiveScript, and then because Java, it was renamed to JavaScript. So here is a short quiz. The first quiz. There will be like one more. Any idea who this guy is? No? Exactly. That's the guy who created Lisp language. The thing that I like to focus on is like his facial hair. Any idea who that guy is? No? Sorry? What? Anyway, Ken Thompson, he created Unix, B language, UTF-8 encoding, and worked on Go as well. So like a lot of stuff. This guy? No? C language, Brian Kernighan.
You wrote the book of the C programming.
Yeah, with the other guy. Yeah, the other guy has a beard as well. So a beard. This guy, it's more. Yeah, Python. So like you can see, like his facial hair gets smaller and smaller. This guy.
Perl.
Yes, Perl, and that's also like So the thing is here, and here is Mats as well. As you can see, like he sometimes at least has facial hair as well. So the assumption is like the longer facial hair the creator had, the better language. So yeah, Perl is not that good, I guess. And that's the guy who created JavaScript. Like, yeah, no facial hair at all. So that's another reason why JavaScript is not that good. So now we have a super quiz time. That's actually like just one more thing. So if you don't know what is, so this quiz is actually based on like a lightning talk from Gary Bernhardt, I guess. He's like Ruby and JavaScript developer, and he had like a lot of screencasts, like Destroy All Software or something like that. Maybe you heard about that. This was from 2012, and back then, images like that were popular. Like, what? What is happening? Let's talk about Ruby first. So what happens if you use a variable that doesn't exist? Not really. Undefined. Be the same, right? If you try to do something like that, the same thing. What happens if you do try something like that? Nil. Why? Just because. Like, whatever. because JavaScript, yeah. Okay, so let's talk about JavaScript. It's more fun. Any idea what this will end up? Like, what would you expect? Like realistically, not like 2 or 7. But... Sorry? Okay. Empty string. Why not? Like, what? Okay, so if you try to add like 2 stuff that is like different. 42, no. No, that would be kind of like, it's actually an object. So addition is commutative, right? So you can like replace, like switch things, and it should give you the same result. So if you do something like that,
Inverted object.
Someone said 0. Congratulations. Yeah. So in general, yeah, like what? So all this stuff is unfortunately, yeah, because the language itself was created like in a really short time, and because the creator does not have any facial hair, there are like a lot of issues in it, and because of like the main assumption is that you shouldn't break the web. The language has to be backward compatible with like whatever crap they came up before, and yeah, that's mainly the problem that we have right now. There is like so language is like one thing, but it's even more complicated. There was like recently something called Smooshgate, which was that they wanted to add like array.flatten method to the language. Like if you don't know what it does, it just creates a new array and just like basically recursively concatenates whatever you have in subarrays to this new one. And the problem was that, so they like, it went through all the stages of like proposal and implementation and everything, and it was released in Firefox nightly, I guess. And it turned out that it broke like a lot of pages for some reason. Why? Because there was like a super popular JavaScript library like 10 years ago called Mootools that implement the same library, the same method. Because in JavaScript, like in Ruby, you can just extend built-in objects as well. So they extended an array with flatten method, which was implemented slightly differently, and it just broke a lot of pages. So cool, right? So not only you have to worry about not breaking the language itself, but even you have to watch out for what people actually did, like what other libraries did before. So it's really actually hard to like fix these bugs that were done before. Even though the language is kind of strange and has like all these quirks. I'm not sure if you know who Jeff Atwood is, but he created Stack Overflow and currently works on co-created. And currently he works with Discourse, this like forum thingy. And he said like long time ago that any application that can be written in JavaScript eventually will be. And it was in 2007. It's even before Node.js was released, like before we could like easily at least write stuff on the server. And he actually was kind of right, because JavaScript right now is everywhere. Web, obviously. But with these progressive web apps that are now, you can just use the same app, the same application that you built for a browser, you can use on your phone. And it will behave like a native app. There is Chrome currently has like this test where you can use progressive web apps on your desktop. So you can write an app once and then run it in browser, mobile phone, and a desktop as well, without like browser. There is obviously like, you can run native stuff like with React Native. There is like Vue Native, Angular Native, all this stuff as well, but you can just write native applications actually for mobile devices. There is even something called JavaScript, which is for devices with memory less than 64 kilobytes or something like that. So if you have like Internet of Things and you want to program all this crap, you can do it with JavaScript as well. So yeah, on the server, obviously, with Node.js, like it's currently everywhere. So the cool thing is like, if you're just starting out as a developer and you want to like pick a language that would be like, you're thinking like which language to pick, JavaScript will actually allow you to like program almost anything. I'm not saying it's like the best language, but it's like almost everywhere. So one really cool thing that like helped JavaScript a lot is tooling. One of these tools is something called Babel. Basically, it's like JavaScript to JavaScript compiler, which doesn't make much sense. But the thing is, it can take like a modern JavaScript and output like a really old version of it that will be that all the browsers can understand, and that allows developers to write in this cool new way and still make sure that it will work in all browsers. So here is like on the left, your left and my left, whatever. You see like what like definition of class in JavaScript. Like we define a new class and then inherit from it. And on the right hand side here, you can see actually like how it's compiled if you want to support like super old browsers. So you have like 30 bytes on the left and like 1.5 kilobyte on the right, which kind of sucks, sure, but it works. It will do exactly the same thing, which is really cool. The thing is that this tool is really cool because you can specify which browsers you want to support. So you probably don't, can you see it? Yeah. So if we say that we want to support like Chrome 50 or something like that, it will just output the same thing because Chrome does support classes. And the really cool thing is that this tool allows like anyone to actually write a plugin. So if you want to come up with like, I know, you have a proposal for some super crazy syntax, you can just write a plugin and just start using it right away. And then it goes through the proposals and everything, and might get rejected, might get accepted, but at least you can already start using that as soon as possible. And I mean, as soon as you write this extension, right? Yeah, so that's like JavaScript. Let's talk about React. So React is a library. That's an important thing for building user interfaces. So there's like a lot of comparisons between React, Angular, Vue, and all this other stuff. The thing is that the rest is actually our frameworks. React is only a library. So the others include things like routing, animations, data fetching, state management, and all this stuff. This is like only for user interfaces. You have to like add the other stuff yourself, which is both a benefit if you know what you're doing. If you're just starting out, it might not be, because you have to like consciously pick them. The thing is like component based. It's nothing strange. That's actually how it looks like. It's like a actually complete React application. You define a function which returns this HTML looking code thingy. And then you just call like React DOM render. The function becomes a component, and you just say where it should be rendered on the page. That's the second argument, like root element, where to put it actually. And that's it. It would render hello Freeletics. The thing is, like, one thing to note is that it's called React DOM and not just React, because React comes with different renderers. You have like React DOM is for web. You have React for can output to a canvas, for example, like graphic stuff. You would have different renderer. You have like React Native, which outputs native stuff. There is like even React VR for virtual reality and stuff like that. It's like a lot of them. Yeah, so we'll just focus on this strange HTML looking stuff. Obviously, I mean, maybe not obviously to everyone, but like for people who have seen JavaScript, it's not really a JavaScript syntax. It's just HTML looking thingy. So the thing is that there is this plugin for Babel, the tool that I just mentioned, that will convert this stuff to something like that. So each of this brackety thing will just become React.createElement function call. So you write this, and when you build your application, will become something like that. And that's something that the browser can understand. You could write it yourself. It would be just super annoying, like writing a lot of stuff. So now I want to talk a bit about data handling in React. And I want to talk about three things, which are prop, state, and context. It will become a bit more clear what it is in a second. Yeah, you cannot really see it, right? Still, I don't know. Okay, let's say it's good enough. I can still do something like that. So that's the thing I mentioned. I talked about before. That's exactly the same code. You can like change to hello world, and it should change here as well. The props thingy is that maybe I can do it here. So let's say that we want to convert it right to something else. You can create a new component. Can you see anything? Maybe like hello, and just return the stuff that was before. And here we can use our new hello component, and it will work just as well. Now, the props thingy allows you to pass like any data into the component. So instead of like hard-coded hello world, we can just pass a name like Freeletics, and it will just become, so whatever, it looks like HTML attributes, and it will just become an input to this function. So props name, sorry about that, props name. The cool thing is that if you've used any other language, this thing in these brackets, it's just JavaScript. That's just a fancy syntax where you can like use any kind of JavaScript. You can do something like to upper scale. No. Anyway, you can like, I can't remember the function name, but whatever. You can just use any kind of JavaScript here that you want. Unlike in other frameworks like Angular or Vue or whatever, they usually use some templating language that you have to learn. They have like strange syntax for iterating over stuff and so on. It's like super complicated. I mean, not always, but that's something that you have to learn. Here you can just use, if you know JavaScript, you can just use JavaScript and it will work. So that's the same. So next thing is state. So while props is something that like a parent component can pass data to like a child component, a state is something that a given component has like its own state that it can modify. And whenever you modify the state, React will just re-render your component. So here we have like super simple that you can just click and it just increments a button, nothing really exciting. The way it works is that this time, because you have a state, you have to use class provided by React, which is a component, and your component extends this React component class. So you define like initial state, and then you have like this set state function that you pass another function to it. You get like the current version of the state, and you return a new version of the state. So we just say like whatever the previous state was of this count thingy, +1. That's it. And then here you have a button. It's just like a React provides you with like these special properties, which is like on click, which is like a handler for whenever you click stuff. You say that, hey, I want this method to be called on this class, and it just works. Obviously, you can combine these two. So here, instead of displaying this count like immediately, we can actually create a new component and just pass our state as a prop to another component. It gets more complicated. So here we just have, just like with our hello component, we have this count component just displays whatever the parent component actually passed to it. The last example is like a bit more complicated. So it displays first 20 episodes from Rick and Morty. I'm not sure if anyone see that. Yay, exactly. So that's just like to show like what else you can do. So that actually fetches data from like an external API. So we just start with like you have initial state of an empty array, like no episodes. Then you use these special callbacks provided by React components. So whenever React actually adds this component to the page, it will call this function. And here we're just using like fetch API, which is like provided by browsers to fetch data from this URL, just whatever. And then we iterate over that and display name of the episode. That's it. So it's like super easy to, for example, if you want to fetch anything from whatever API, our own, some external one, it's pretty easy. Okay. So the last thing that I haven't really prepared like any app because it's more complicated. So you can quite easily imagine that like in React, almost everything is a component, and the component tree can quite quickly get like really deep, like very high. And there is something like, so instead of like passing all this data, so let's say you have like a component that fetches current user in our application, right? And then like somewhere deep there, down there, you have like a component that's supposed to display user avatar, something like that. If you would have to pass this current user through all these components just to get here, it would be like super boring, and changing like tree structure would require you to like remember that you have to pass it through that. So there is something called context, and context allows you to basically have like a provider for data, and then you have like a consumer for data that you can put like anywhere in this tree. And whenever this data changes, it will re-render the consumer as well. So if your component depends on the consumer, it will get re-rendered whenever this stuff changes. And that allows you to, just have like basically use this data anywhere without having to pass it like through the whole tree structure. And these are like the three things, like this props, state, and context, are the three things that React provides for managing data. Obviously, you can use like whatever else you want, like Redux, whatever, but it's not provided by React itself. So that's just that. And surprisingly, at least some people say that it's like complete everything, that it's just enough, and you can write like any arbitrary complex applications with that. So obviously there is more to it. Like it's not whole React. There is like a lot to it, but that's like the basics. If you want to like write a simple application, fetch something from internet, whatever, display something, manage something, user input, that's all you actually need to know. I'll just very, very briefly mention React Native as well. Yeah, it allows you to build mobile applications. Cool. Cool things that, like, I'm not sure how, yeah, for our mobile developers, something that is called hot reloading is that when you develop your application and you modify some code, it will automatically reload just this tiny part of code and not the whole thing. I'll just show it in a second. And the second thing is that because you're actually, the app itself is native, right? But it's like driven by JavaScript. So what you can do is you can have like over-the-air updates, which is really cool because you do not have to go through the whole like release process. If you want to fix like a tiny bug, you can just like fix it in JavaScript and release like a new JavaScript bundle. And applications like this created with React Native will update, will figure out that, hey, there's a new JavaScript bundle. They will fetch it, execute it, and yeah, for example, I know the bug you fixed is gone without people actually having to do anything, which is really cool. Yeah, I just wanted to show you how it works. Yeah, I guess it's super tiny still. So that's, this code is React Native. It's actually almost exactly the same as React itself. And the only difference is that instead of using all these divs and spans and whatever HTML elements you have, here you're using like the library itself provides you with like specific components that it has because they map to native components. So you use like text views, like scroll views and all this stuff that I'm not really aware of. Like I don't really know that. But the thing is that the code for, so the thing is that you have like a native application that's exactly the same as the last example. Basically fetches data from internet and shows like displays a list of Rick and Morty episodes. The code is exactly the same. So this part is like exactly the same. We are even using the same fetch API, which is provided by this time. So in the last example, it was provided by the browser natively. Here it's provided by React Native library. So you don't even have to change this code. So like the logic part is exactly the same. Here, the only difference is that instead, like I said, instead of these divs and stuff, we are using like native components. And instead of mapping ourselves through the array of episodes, we have like this list component where you just pass all the data. And this component provides all this fancy stuff like renders virtual lists. So if you have like 10,000 components or something like that, it will make sure that it's still performant and scrolls very quickly by rendering only what user can actually see. And the cool thing that I want to mention, I'm not sure if it will be actually visible, is this hot reloading. So normally when you like open this, it will first show you the header episodes, and after a second or so, it will show the list of episodes because it has to actually make a request to fetch it from the internet. But if you like change it to like, I don't know, Rick and Morty and just save it, it updated the title here like without reloading anything. And that's what hot reloading is. So it can just figure out what has changed and only change this small part of code and rerun it without reloading the whole state of your application. It would be even better probably with this like button thingy that I showed, like clicker thingy. So you can like increment, your counter to like 10, change something, and it will stay 10, even though some other parts of the screen has changed. So that's really cool. And that's actually all I have. Here, I'll probably post it somewhere. If you're interested, here's like a few links about like history that I mentioned, like this lightning talk that I mentioned about like JavaScript quirks as well. It's also explained why it happened. I mean, to be honest, I don't know even. We don't add objects to arrays, so I don't have to know it really. One cool thing is that we actually have subscription to something called Frontend Masters, which is like video courses service. So if any one of you is interested in like knowing more about CSS, HTML, JavaScript, basically whatever web related, we have it, so you can just use it. There is a lot of stuff about programming itself as well. So there are like courses about like algorithms and data structures in JavaScript. If anyone like trees, how to like all this stuff, graphs and so on. And yeah, that's it. Thank you. Yes, Omar.
That's the aspect of the standardization that seems. For example, you mentioned that if I want to implement my app, also all browser, I don't know which version. I think this is the first dependency, right?
No, so the thing is that it kind of depends on what you mean by dependency. So no, I mean the thing is that the tool that I showed, this bubble thingy that converts like your code, it happens on while you have to build your app, right? So it happens like when we on Jenkins or on your own laptop, whatever, wherever, and then you just deploy the results, like whatever this app whatever this tool generated.
So you use Bubble to compile the code.
Yes.
But also Bubble can work in the browser.
I think there is a version of it that can, but it really doesn't make much sense because it's really huge.
Any other dependencies, like for example, Bootstrap depends on JavaScript?
No, they're none. I mean, no, they're none. I mean, the one thing is that it does depend on some browser APIs that might not exist in your very super old browser. But again, this bubble tool can actually like figure out, if you say like which browsers you want to support, it will not only convert your code to the old version, but it will also provide polyfills for these old APIs that are not supported that you require. So it will just, when it builds your app, it just figures out what you're actually using. And if you say that you want to support like IE 9 or something like that, it will figure out, okay, so you're using this and these APIs, which do not exist in IE 9. So I'll just add like a polyfills for you. So your app will be much bigger because of that, but it will work. I'm not sure. Does it answer your question? Kind of?
Will it work in Netscape 1.0?
No. Okay, thanks.
Cool. Thanks so much.